functions. I believe we did functions last week already. So I'll basically just brush through some of the things a bit and just move fast. What's the time? 8:09. So what are functions? Functions are basically functions are defined with, let me just call this for us here. Functions are defined with the function keyword followed by a name and a parenthesis. So what does this mean? Function, a actual function is basically defined with the function keyword. So we use the keyword called what? Function to define a function. And let's say we call the function my function, and followed by parenthesis. My browser is frozen. Okay, followed by parenthesis. Browser is frozen. Or is it real pizza is frozen? Let me just close this down. Yeah, you can talk. Joseph, you can go ahead.
Sorry, sir.
Yep.
When you are talking about the ternary operators,
Okay.
and you said it's a sort and code.
Okay.
So
Yes.
what you do that time, the code you write. I don't understand the code. The way the other ones you know how it works. So this one you just write it and just like a normal word and how it works, the code, what you put and how the things work. I don't understand it. Thank you.
Okay, let me go right again. From here. Okay. So basically, do you understand how this works? Do you understand what I explained here for this one? Joseph.
Yes, I'm with you, sir.
Okay, do you understand this one with the if-else statements?
Yes, I understand you, sir.
Okay, good. Now it's still the same thing, but with ternary operators shorthand. So basically, what we did here was this condition can drive is what
Yeah.
we evaluated here. So what ternary operator basically does is, instead of writing this elaborate if check, it basically uses this question mark and it checks that if this is true, then do this. Else, if this is it. Else, if this is true, do this. Do this. Else, if this is true, do this. Then else, the final else, this one is this. Do you
Okay.
understand? So basically, what the ternary operator does is, if this is true, do this. The same thing as if can drive is true, do this. Console log this. Else,
Okay.
if this is true. Now, this full column is else. Else, it now checks
Okay.
again that else, if this is true, if as driver says is true, another question mark, then do this. Do this, the same thing as this. Then the final else, which is this. If this was another else, if it's going to be else if else if let's say yada yada yada, whatever is inside there. Else, if this is true, do this. Else, do this again. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Is it clear now?
Yes, it's clear. Thank you. It's just
Okay.
the special character that you use between the function. That's what I
O-
don't understand.
okay. This one is basically else.
Yes, yes. Thank you,
This
sir.
means else. Okay. Okay. So JavaScript functions are declared with a function keyword followed by a name and parentheses. So basically, this is a JavaScript function, and let's say our function, and functions take something called arguments. So let's say our function is, let's say our function takes an argument A. We want to, and sometimes functions have return statements or not. So let's say we want to return A plus 10. So basically, what I did there was I defined a function called my function that takes an argument A. An argument is basically something you are telling it to do, or something you are passing into it, rather, not telling it to do. Something you are passing into it or giving to it. So we are giving our function A that take A and do whatever it is you want to do with it. So our function takes A, returns, and returns whatever value this evaluates to. Now let's see. Let's call our function, and the function is invoked by calling it with the parentheses. Basically, this is how we call a function. Basically, pass parentheses in front of it to call it. And our function takes an argument A. So let's pass our argument A. So let's console and see what this evaluates to. 20. So basically, um, that's the way a function is declared. And function invocation, which I just explained, is basically when you call your function with this is function invocation. Function invocation simply means calling your function with the parentheses, and whatever it's let me just please write this here. Okay, the code inside the function will execute when it is invoked or called with the parentheses operator. So basically, when you call your function with this, whatever we wrote inside this function will be invoked. And like I said, we don't need to return um, anything from our functions. What if we just console some things? Let's say we console different people's names. We have Abidemi, um, we have Kauta, we have Samuel, we have Joseph, we have Joseph, we have, whose name have I not written? We have Rukayat, um, whose name have I missed? Doris, Tunde. Okay, we have Doris, and we have Tunde, and they are all strings. String, 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 string. So even if we don't return anything in this function, if we call this function, it will execute everything within this function. let's call it, who did I not spell very well? Okay, console.log. It will
Hello,
execute
sir.
everything inside. Yes.
Please, what does return function means?
Return basically breaks a function. It ends a function basically. So let's do something here now. Normally, this function is meant to run Abidemi, Kautam, Samuel, Joseph, Rukaya, Doris, and Tunde, right? But if I return the function here, I'm telling the function, let's not, okay, I'll explain something called break, something called continue, and something called, okay, I'm explaining return right now. So basically, what I'm telling it is, um, evaluate this alone and return at this point. So return basically means break out of the function. So you can even see from our code editor that it has told us that it's not going to get to this point. So let's see what
Yes.
happens. It basically evaluates Abidemi alone and doesn't get to this point. Now, uh, it returns those two things. It breaks this function and also returns whatever value you are trying to return. Now, this return you are seeing here is undefined because we are not telling it to return anything in particular. So let's say at this point now, we want to return I am done. Can you see? We basically told it that at this point, break the function and return that I am done working. So the function tells us that I am done working and it ends it there. It doesn't console the rest of the people. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll come to
Yes, sir.
this when we are doing, I want to come to this when we are doing loops. So don't let me touch break and continue yet until we get to loops. Let me just leave the return as it is. When we get to loops, we'll do break and continue. Okay, so what else? That's what return does. Function invocation. So let's quickly play around with this example. I have an example here. So let's use this. So now let's say we want to convert this value from Fahrenheit to Celsius. So we have a function called to Celsius. And what this basically does is it takes a value. What did I call this Fahrenheit here? I called it something. Look at me the keyword I use for it.
Argument.
Argument. Thank you. So it basically takes an argument. Give me a minute, please.
Please, I can't hear you, sir.
Yeah, sorry. Um, okay. So I want to clarify something. Okay. So I said this to self function takes an argument. Now, there's something I want to clarify. I might have said this wrongly. This is called, well, it's still called an argument, but sometimes it has to be right of, you have to use the right terminology. There's a difference between argument and parameters, but I don't want us to get confused. That's what I was trying to clarify uh, earlier. Now, where you are declaring
So-
your
Sorry,
function,
sorry. Okay, sorry,
Okay.
sir. Like for
Yeah.
parameters, I don't know. Based on my knowledge, I think parameters basically have to do with when you have two values, like you want to put in two values, or you're trying to call. I don't know if you're getting my statements right. Maybe
Yes.
for instance, maybe 8 and
Okay.
9. Yeah, that's why I think that's why they use parameters or something. If not, she's right.
Mm, it's still called, no, it doesn't necessarily have to be when you are using, because that's what I quickly have to check.
Okay. Okay.
Um Basically, because we use this wrongly all the time, but so many times I call this arguments, and I just discovered that it is actually, we use this one doesn't matter, it's just semantics though. Can you hear me? Does someone want to
Yes,
talk?
sir.
Okay. So basically, when you are declaring your function, in this function, this is called a parameter. Now, at this point, this is called a parameter. But when you are now calling the function, what you are passing to the function is called the argument. I hope you are not confused. Are we confused?
No.
Okay, thank you. When, like I said, when you declare the function, whatever you pass inside there is called whatever you defined when you declare the function is called a parameter. So for example, now this function takes a parameter called Fahrenheit. But now when you call the function and whatever you are passing to the function at this point is called an argument. This is not a big deal, trust me, because I've never even had to check for the difference before. Okay, maybe I have checked before, sure. But it's not really a big deal, but it's just semantics. So
All right,
that's
sir.
that. All right. Um, so basically now what we want to do is we want to convert this Fahrenheit to, now we've defined a function that does what, that converts Fahrenheit to Celsius. So basically we have 6 Fahrenheit and want to convert it to Celsius. What does this evaluate to? Evaluates to minus 14 points, blah 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 blah. So that's that with functions. Function returns. I've explained what function return is. I've explained what function invocation is. Function return is, and just like I don't know who was talking earlier, Samuel. If a function can take multiple parameters, it doesn't have to be oh god. Okay, I just remember something now again. This is starting to get confused. If function can take multiple parameters in, for example, now let's say we have a function. I want to explain something. Function example. Let's say we have a function called example. It can take multiple parameters a, b, and c, and do whatever it. Let's say we are now evaluating. I need to clarify something. Because in Python we have something called position argument and keyword argument, but now we are calling these parameters. I think we should just forget this parameter argument thing for now. I'll come back to clarify it with us. Okay, so basically we have something called, that was why I laughed the other time when I remembered. We have something called position arguments and keyword arguments. What this basically means is, in this function, the way when I call this function, the order in which I defined my variables here will be the order in which they will be used inside my function. So now, for example, this is A. A is 1, B is 3, and C is what? 5. Now they'll be used in this same particular order. That's why they are called positional argument. But for keyword arguments, we define in JavaScript. This is in JavaScript, right? Yeah, this is JavaScript. So in JavaScript, we define their keys. For example, this will be called A, this will be B, and this will be C. So now when we are using them here, we have to get their, we have to do something called destructuring. It's also called destructuring in JavaScript. Are we still together? Have I lost us? Are we still together? Are we still getting it? Let me be sure that I've not lost everybody at this point. Please unmute. Are we still together? Are we still together?
Yes, yes, we are together. We are together,
Okay.
Yes,
sir.
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So what this basically means is at this point it will A is 1. So we are, so irrespective of the order in which we destructure it here at this point, because we have defined the keys, that's why it's called keyword argument. In the function basically just it looks out for A. Even if you don't get A first or call A first, it looks out for A, and doesn't care about the order, and looks out for B and looks out for C, and that runs as I didn't return. Okay, let me console this so we can see the value. Okay, and that runs as 9. So we can see for us to see the difference, let's do A times B, then B times B plus C. So A times B is what? So we know the answer before we run it. A times B is what? 4. 3 rather. 1 times 3, 3. 3 plus 5, 15. What have I done? What have we done? This is 1 times 3.
It's
3.
correct. It should
Oh,
be
it's
8.
plus. Okay, it should be 8. Okay. I read then 15. Maybe I divided this as times. So 1 times 3 is what? 3. 3 plus 5, 8. So we can see that irrespective of the order in which they were declared here, or they were declared here rather, in keyword arguments, all we have to do is just get the structure and get the exact key variables. Now, someone will ask, what happens if I decide to get F? What happens? It doesn't know what F. What happens if I decide to get F? Let's say we add this and we're adding F to it. Let's see what will happen. What does it say? Let me remove C. What does it say? It doesn't know what F is, not a number. Because it doesn't know what F is, it's unable to evaluate. So do you understand now? So that's the difference between positional argument and keyword argument. We are still correct. Okay, our definition of argument and parameter is still correct. Looking at it now, it's still correct. It's still correct because we are passing it from this point. So it's at this point that we are using them as positional argument and keyword argument. So yes, it's still correct. That's that as regards that. Any questions before we move on to if I'm not forgetting anything? Yes, positional argument, keyword argument, what else? Functions. Something called arrow functions in ES6. Let me quickly touch that before we move on. So in ES6, basically, instead of writing this function like this, it's basically a shorthand form of writing functions, and we can basically write the function as instead of using the function keyword, can easily write it as this, and it still does the same. Thing. Yep. So this is an arrow function. Do you understand? Is it confusing?
Not at all, sir.
Okay, thank you. So now
It's
we can
confusing, sir.
okay. So basically, there are two ways of before ES6, that's before 2015. We used to declare functions only using the function keyword. But there's something called but when ES6 was released in JavaScript ES6, what is ES6 in JavaScript? ES6 is basically the ECMA script 6. So this was the new standardized version of JavaScript that was published in 2015. Now, this released some new features. So now from ES6 downwards, we can now declare functions using something called arrow functions. Let me write it from scratch for us. So basically, what do we do with functions here? We declare the function name. So let's say we use const to declare variables, right? So const, what's our function name? Example. Now we make it equal to parentheses, which is where we pass our arguments, our parameters rather. It's parameter and arguments in our this is where we pass our parameters, and it uses an arrow function to take in a block of code of whatever it is we want to execute. So now we have a block that takes whatever it is we want to execute in this function. So so whatever this was doing is still the exact thing this is doing. Same format, just different way of declaring the function. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. And that's with arrow functions. And let's say, let me just use this. Let's say this takes A, B, and C. Let me call the function with positional argument. So this 1, 2, 3. What have I missed? Okay, I didn't call it. I called it now. Okay, because it's a duplicate. Yep, and that's it. 8. So you can see it still works the exact way. So that's that as regards functions and JP already did functions with us, so just a quick brush through. Then there's something called higher order functions. This is asked in interviews a lot. So what are higher order functions? What's the time? Should be wrapping up now. So basically, higher order functions are, let me write it. These are functions. These are functions that take other functions as arguments, returns a function, and returns a function as a result, or both. So what does this mean? What's an higher order function? An higher order function is basically a function that takes another function as an argument.
Screen is not better.
Eh?
Your screen is not clear.
Okay, let me. Is it better now?
Yes,
How do I
sir.
change the color of this thing? Okay. So higher order functions are functions that take other functions as arguments, and returns a function. So what does this mean? What's an higher order function? An higher order function is basically a function that takes another function as an argument. An higher order function is basically a function that takes another function as an argument. So basically, higher order functions are functions that take other functions as arguments, and returns a function as a result or both. So what does this mean? Let's take a quick example. So let's define a function called higher order function. Higher order function. And it takes another function called as an argument, called func as argument, and returns what? A function. Now let's define another function called add. Yep. So now when we call higher order function, let me console this. So when we call higher order function, what does it do? What does our definition say? It takes other functions as what? As arguments. So now we pass our function what? Add into it as an argument, and we pass what? I'll explain significance of this later. And we pass what? What we want to add 6 and let's say we want to add 3 and 5. This will evaluate to what? To 8. So what do we think happens here? This function is basically an higher order function. Why? Because it takes another function as argument and returns a function. Now, at this point, when this is returned from here, then it evaluates this add function that now returns a plus b. So look at it from here. So basically, we call this at this point, right? It takes add. Let me copy this. It takes this. So at this point, we have this. And at this point, it returns what? It returns add 3.5, right? Now, we now call this add 3.5, which now evaluates our 3.5, 3.5 rather, which now evaluates our 3.5 and evaluates it as what? 3 plus 5. Now, the significance of higher order functions is okay, let me write out the characteristics first rather, so we don't mix it up. So characteristics of an higher order function. What are the conditions for a function to be an higher order function? Takes a function as an argument. And what's the second characteristic? It returns a function. Please never forget this. They ask in interviews a lot. I can't remember the number of times I've been asked this in an interview. It returns a function. This is a very common JavaScript interview question. These are the characteristics of an higher order function. It takes a function as an argument and returns another function. And now, this basically is the foundation upon which so many inbuilt JavaScript functions work, such as map, filter, what other one? Reduce. Doesn't give me an example. Reduce, for each, every, sum, find index, includes. All of this work on the foundation of what? Of higher order functions, because a map is a function that basically takes whatever function you are giving it. A filter is a function as well. Reduce is a function as well. For each, every, all of these are functions. Splice, includes, join. Let me just stop at this. So now, let's quickly do an example with map. So let's say we have any question first before I continue, so I don't go too far before we have to go back. Any question? Any question? I'll take that there's no question, right? Okay, so basically we have let's say we have an array of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. remove the prediction, sure. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. An array of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what we want to do is we want to double each number. So we can do this using the map function. This guy just predicted it for us. So we can do this using the map function. So what the map function basically does is let me take this out first. It loops through, what the map basically does is it loops through each of the values in our array or iterable. I need to, what's an iterable? An iterable is basically what do I call this? Basically an array or a list or something that we can loop through. Something that we can loop through, yeah. It's called an iterable. So now what this guy does is what map does is it looks at numbers array and loops through each and every number. So it comes to 1, then moves to 2, then moves to 3, then moves to 4, then moves to 5. Let me see this definition for map. There should be a definition somewhere. Array map. There's no definition. Okay, so basically, like I said, hope you are following. What it does is it loops through each of these and evaluates whatever you pass into the function and returns a new array. What does map do? Loops through each element in your array and evaluates based on the function you passed as an argument. So now in this context, a map is basically what? An higher order function. Why? Because it takes another function as an argument. So now let's say we want to let me do this very well. So let's say we want to take this function. Let's say we want to loop through each of these and do what? And for each number in our array, we want to multiply by 2. For each number in our array, we want to multiply by 2. So let's see what this gives us. So this should give us a new array with double of each of these numbers. So what does this do? This comes here. This goes through each of the numbers in our array. 1. It gets to 1. It multiplies 1 by 2. It first of all creates a new array for us. Now comes to 1, multiplies 1 by 2, comes to 2, multiplies 2 by 2, comes to 3, multiplies 3 by 2, comes to 4, multiplies 4 by 2, like that until the end. And what does it do? Then it returns a new array with double of each of the values. So now let's console log double number. Numbers. No, do I need to call this? No. So we can see. So this basically just returns, where is that console coming from? So this basically returns a new array with what? With double of each of the values. So like we said, what map does as an higher order function is it loops through, let's say the definition here, calls a defined callback on each element of the array and returns an array that contains the result. So it basically loops through each of the elements in your array and performs the function we told it to do here on each element. So basically it comes here, takes your function number, returns number times 2, which is this, does this, does this, does this, it does this, it does this, and it returns your new array, which is what 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And we have several other functions. We have filter. Who can tell me another way of writing this? I explained this today. Just call it, let me write it. Instead of using the function keyword like this, who can tell me a neater way of writing it? Using arrow functions. That's what tell me how to write it with arrow function quickly. Oh yeah, somebody should omit and tell me how to write it with arrow function now. We're out of time already. I think we'll just stop here. We'll continue with filter next week. Can anyone hear me? Maybe I'm alone here. Oh yeah,
Yes, sir.
now. Oh yeah,
Can hear you.
try. Oh yeah, how should I write it with arrow function? Does someone want to try? You want to try? Who wants to try? Who wants to try?
Instead of the function,
Mm-hmm.
you can write open. Is it the old font? Is it the old something you should rewrite, or
No,
starting from the other
this
place?
this anonymous function that we declared here, we want to write it with an arrow function. The reason I call it an anonymous function is because it doesn't have a name. Functions that don't have a name are called anonymous functions. So now we want to write it as an arrow function. So what do we do? Hmm? This is it.
Then
Does this look strange to us? Basically, what this does is this is an ES6 way of declaring of passing anonymous functions. So what this basically does is it takes our parameter number and returns. Now what this arrow function here does is it returns number times 2. So instead of using this here now, I can just pass it like that and it works. Is that clear? Is that clear? Any
Yes, sir.
questions? Okay. I think I will give us filters assignment safe. Okay, so I think let's just send the class here for today. We'll touch on some other functions next week. It is the popular ones that I know you will always use. Let me copy this and pass this as a note to us. Any questions before we close for today? Any questions? You have any question?
Sir, my question is it that you
Okay.
mean that the arrow function it returns the function? I don't seem like I understand it. That's why I don't even answer it. The
Okay,
arrow
what
function.
this does is, yes, what this does is the arrow. Now, in this type of, let's go back to what we did previously. First of all, we did a normal function that has a name. Let's say this function is called multiply by 2, and it returns this, right? Now, if I want to change this to an arrow function, what I'll basically do is this. Const multiply by 2 equals, now this is the name of the function, equals the arrow function, and I can do this. In ES6, In ES6, this arrow function, this arrow rather returns. I can do it in two ways. I can either come here and return like this, eh? Or I can also do this. I don't need to use the keyword return, because in ES6, the arrow function already means already JavaScript understands that it is meant to return whatever is here based on ES6 syntax. Do you understand? So these are, now I've written the same thing in three different ways. Do you understand?
Yes, sir. Thank
So basically, instead of using this function keyword here, JavaScript understands that this arrow is still performing the same return function. So it does what? It returns this. But I can still decide to use return as a keyword, and it returns this. And I can decide to use the normal way of writing functions, which is this. So basically, arrow function is a way of is a shorthand way. Let me just call it a shorthand way. Shorthand. Shorthand way of writing functions, because you don't need to define everything explicitly. Once you use the arrow function, it knows that this is return. This should be returned rather, and this returns it by default. So I hope I was able to clarify everyone's question.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank
Okay.
you so much, sir.
Yep. So that do I need to send this to you also? I can delete it. Or do we need this? Just copy everything. Am I copying the same thing? Other functions. Okay, replace from here. Okay. So thank you, everyone. I'll send the assignments tomorrow by God's grace. It shouldn't take long this time around because I'm available today. See you next week. Thank you for joining. Oh, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye, sir. Good night, sir. Thank you.
Bye. Good night. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Samuel. Bye, guys.
Yes, good night, sir.